Hello and welcome to this brand new Kuba HQ tutorial. I'm Kuba Michalski and I will be your host for today. Now, if you're a motion designer, chances are that sooner or later one of your clients will request you to do a handwritten text reveal. If you worked in this industry for a while, most likely you have done your share of text reveals and you just dread the idea of making another one. I looked around the internet for tutorials on how to do this effect, and I noticed that most of them present a very inefficient way of creating revealing text. So while today's tutorial is not really going to teach you anything revolutionary, I'm going to show you what I believe is the quickest and most efficient way of doing text reveals, saving you some time and hassle in the process. This is what we're going to be doing. A really simple composition, really. Some text drawing itself, some particles flying around from the tip of invisible pen. Nice, sparkly, clean. Clients will love it. Alright, let's get right on it. This is the text that we're going to be working with. I created it in Photoshop using a font called Scriptina. Now, normally I would probably prefer to work with something handwritten, but my calligraphy skills aren't really that stellar, so we have to settle for something artificial. So let's import it into After Effects. I'm going to bring it as composition, cropped layers, since I have the background and the text separate. And at this point you would probably start drawing paths, trying to animate nulls, etc., doing all this tedious work of revealing. I have a simpler solution for you. Let's jump into Adobe Illustrator and import the text right here. Let's open our Photoshop file here in Illustrator. We bring it as flat layers. We don't really need any of the data. In fact, we're going to lock the layer right now and create a new one on which we'll draw. And we're going to use the pencil tool for that. And the first thing you want to do is double click on it and make sure that you have a smoothness at around 30%. That's going to help smooth out all the strokes that we'll be making. Also, for better visibility, let's change the stroke color to, let's say, red, and zoom in a little bit. Now, the cool thing about the pencil tool is all the strokes that you draw in Illustrator can be copied and pasted into After Effects as masks. Now, After Effects will recognize not only the order in which you drew those paths, but also the direction in which you made them. That means whatever we draw right now in Illustrator will become the path of the reveal for the text. Okay, so let me adjust it just a tiny bit, and I'm going to be using a Wacom tablet to do my strokes, but because we have smoothing on, you can do it with a mouse as well, and they'll turn out pretty good. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is the order in which you stroke the text, because this is going to be the path along which the reveal will happen later on. And you can see right now that my paths are far from perfect. In fact, they are shaking quite a bit, but as soon as I release the Illustrator smoothing option, cleans it up quite nicely. Now this is the last stroke. It's a long one. This is going to take a while. You just have to bear with me. Now you don't need to hurry in here. If you go fast, actually Illustrator may put fewer control points on the path, and that may be difficult to modify later on. Well, there we are. This is done. So let's take a normal selection tool, select all the paths. Remember, our original layer is locked, so we're not selecting that. Copy it and jump back to After Effects. In here we're going to create a new layer, call it Stroke, and paste our masks inside. I can tell you right now that those masks are not sitting exactly where they're supposed to be. Sometimes it may even happen that they'll be in a wrong scale, so we need to adjust that. Let's lower the transparency a little bit, and yes, indeed they are slightly offset. So I'm going to click on one of the masks and then drag a rectangle from outside of my comp to select all of them, and then double click. So I have all of them selected, and now just with the arrows on the keyboard I can make sure they are sitting in place. Let's zoom in here a little bit more adjustment, and this seems to be fine. Okay, to do our reveal, we're going to be using Trapcode's 3D Stroke plugin. Now, this is not something that comes by default with After Effects. You need to purchase it separately, but it's a really good plugin, and apart from doing text reveals, it can do some really fancy effects. So I strongly recommend getting this one, either from trapcode.com or from redgiant.com. Let's apply it right now to our stroke layer. And you can see that it already recognized our masks and it's creating something. Now, in order to see better what's happening, I'm going to move the stroke underneath my text and change its color to red. Now, provided your paths were drawn perfectly, you have just 2 more steps to go and your text reveal will be ready. I know that ours aren't, so we're going to have a little bit more work. First one is to switch on stroke sequentially, and why we need to do it is right now the filter strokes each of the masks at the same time, and what we want to do is to stroke mask number 1, then number 2, 3, 4, etc. So let's turn this on, and the second step is to animate the end property. So we're going to set it at the value of 0 in the beginning of our timeline, go to 10 seconds and move it to 100. And as I move the slider up, you can see how our animation will look. Now, we're going to make this text reveal last just 4 seconds, but for the reasons that will become obvious in a moment, for now we're setting it to 10 seconds. We're going to use the stroke layer as the animated mat for our reveal. Now, the problem right now is that the stroke thickness is quite high. It's at 10 pixels, which means as the stroke draws itself, it's going to come across some parts of the text that is not yet to be revealed. So we need to make it just a bit thinner, and I think 6.5 should be approximately the right size. We can also move the stroke above our text layer and clean it up a little bit. So let's go to the end of our animation at the time code of 10 seconds and see what's happening. Now the queue looks just fine. It's properly covered, but in here we can see some white sticking out, and for that we just need to adjust the nodes a little bit. So basically you need to move those paths to make sure that there is no pieces left uncovered, and there are going to be some. There is no way to avoid it really. We have one here. Now you may also let go some of those, but I'm pretty much a perfectionist and I like everything to be done properly in here. Alright, the top of an H, move it right here, move it around. Yeah, you're getting bored, you're getting sleepy, you don't want to watch any more tutorials. I think we're done. Yeah, perfect. Now honestly, I was expecting it to take much longer. I'm quite happy with how quick and painless that became. So, we have our animated stroke on top of the text. We're going to take the Kuba HQ and switch its mode into alpha matte stroke. And at this point, I think we can bring the opacity of the layer back up. And there we go. The reveal is ready. Let's just truncate it in here and do a quick preview. And you can see that we're still getting a little bit of pieces sticking out. So this is something that we may want to troubleshoot. But let's see it at the full speed. I'm going to hit U to get my keyframes and play it back at full speed, and let's see which ones of those are visible. So it's fine until then. We have a bit of a problem on a B hooking up into A. Let's hide the mask. This doesn't look very good. And then we have a tiny dot from the H that's being revealed by the mask of A. So let's quickly fix these two. We can move this mask a bit in, and that fixes the first one. And then the B. Alright, this is looking pretty good. So, the reveal is ready, and if that's all you wanted from this tutorial, you can go on your merry way. But if you want to see how can we beautify it a little bit, adding some particles, some sparkles, a little bit of shine, stick around, and that's what we're going to be doing next. If we look at our preview video, you will see that we have two different effects running on top of the reveal. One is apparently the particles, and the second one is a flare that travels along the path as it reveals itself. Now, in order to drive both of those effects, we'll need to have a null that follows the same path we just created in Illustrator. And this is what we're going to be doing now. You're probably aware that we can copy any mask or any path in After Effects and paste it into the position property of a null layer, creating a motion path. It's simple enough with a single mask, but when we have 5 of them, things get a little bit more complex. Nothing to worry though, we're going to solve it within a minute or two. So let's create a new null layer from layer new null object. I can never seem to memorize the shortcut for that, and reveal its position. And for our stroke animation, we can get back to a 10-second length right now. It's going to make things much easier for us. On the stroke layer, we hit letter M to reveal all the mask properties, and then create a keyframe on each of the masks. Now we select the keyframe of the mask 1, copy it, select position of null 1, and this is very important that you actually click on the text saying position and paste the data. And we can immediately see that we did indeed create a motion path for our null, at least for the first object. We can also see that it's not quite well synchronized with our stroke animation. And that's because the 5 masks that create the reveal are of a different length. If you compare, for example, the tail of a letter Q with a last stroke, the difference in length is quite apparent. This is a very short one, and this is massively long. In order to adjust it, we'll need to squeeze the keyframes a little bit and set them up properly. So let's zoom in here and see where is the last point of the Q. Now in here we can already see the tail revealing, so if we back up just one more frame, this is going to be the last of the Q animation, and we can take the last frame of our pasted motion path, snap it to that time, then right click on it and set toggle hold keyframe. Now why we're doing a hold keyframe in here is that right after that we're pasting another motion path, and we don't want our null to move between these 2 points. We want it to stop here and then reappear in a different place. Otherwise, when we're doing the particles, which are driven by the motion of this null, we're going to have some really nasty jets of sparkles coming out in those points when the null transitions between the 2 paths. Doing the hold keyframe is going to solve that. So let's grab the next mask. That would be mask 2. Select the keyframe, copy it, select position. Again, I'm clicking on the name and you can see it selects all the keyframes. Move 1 frame ahead, I'm using page down for that, and paste it. And again, we need to adjust the timing of it. Let's zoom in on the timeline a little bit and maybe turn off some of the switches to give ourselves a little bit more space. Alright, let's see where the tail of Q finishes. It's about here. Grab the last frame, snap it, right click, toggle hold keyframe. Again, 1 frame ahead, mask 3, copy, position, paste, move ahead, This is a longer one, so let's see where does it end. Right about here. Move the last keyframe, toggle hold one frame ahead, rinse and repeat. Copy, paste, observe. Where are we right now? This is the A. That should be the last spot. Hold keyframe, and this is our last mask. Copy, paste, and we know that it ends at 10 seconds, so we can just safely move it there. And right now we can see that our null is moving in perfect sync with the reveal animation. So this is going to serve us really well as long as the motion of the reveal is linear. What I mean by that is if I reveal the keyframes for my 3D stroke, you can see that both the first and the last keyframe are the standard linear nodes. There is no easing on them. If we want to make the animation, let's say 4 seconds long, we can just bring the last one in here, then select all the keyframes of the position, and with Alt pressed, condense them to that length, and they're still going to follow it accurately. Unfortunately, this is not what I want to do. What I want to do is to get this last keyframe and ease it so that the pen slows down when doing the last stroke of the letter Q. And to do that, we're going to use a very simple expression and create a secondary null that will be our actual driver for all the effects. So let's go to the 4th second again, bring this keyframe back in here and ease it by hitting F9. We can also hit N to trim the length of the timeline and perhaps extend it. We can hide the stroke for now, and let's create a new null. Let's see if I manage to remember the shortcut. I guess it's Shift Control Alt Y. Yes, wonderful. Let's rename this one into driver, and also I'm going to change the color of it into yellow so that it's a little bit more visible. Now I need to reveal the position of it and also apply an effect to it. And the effect that we're going to need sits inside of the expression controls, and it's called the slider control. So let's just drag it onto our driver layer and rename it into time. Okay, this is all gonna make sense in just a second. Let's alt click on a stopwatch of position of our driver to enable expressions and drag it, connecting it to the position of our red null, the original null that we just finished. Then after the data that has been pasted into it, we're going to write dot value at time, open parenthesis, link it to our slider, close parenthesis. Now in case you're not very familiar with expressions, this is the text of the resulting expression pasted into Notepad. So this portion is what After Effects pasted in after we linked to the position of null 5. And this is what we added, value at time and the link to our slider control. Alright, you can pause the video here, but I'm closing it. Do not save. Now, what this expression does, it basically allows us to control the readout of the position of the original red null, which since we don't need anymore, I can right now shy away and animate it just like we animate the stroke property. So let's create a keyframe on the time slider, 0 at 0 seconds, go to 4 seconds and move it to 10 because this is where our original null ends. And we can now ease this keyframe, again hitting F9, and you can see that the yellow null is right now beautifully following our reveal animation. You can also see the red null lagging away very slow at its original animation speed. So all the hard work is done right now, and only simple and fun parts remain. First of all, let's add a little lens flare that's going to follow our driver null and create a bit of a shine at the revealing end of the text. And for that, I'm going to create a new solid, composition size, call it flare. Now, I'm planning to use Video Copilot's optical flares plugin for that, but you can do pretty much whatever you want. You can use the original built-in flares that exist in After Effects. You can use Null Light Factory. Hell, you can even create a graphic in Photoshop, attach it to the driver by parenting. Why I'm going to use optical flares is I simply like the way they look, and the plugin itself allows quite a high level of customization, which I want to have in here. So this is optical flares. First of all, let's link it to the driver. Maybe I'm going to make our timeline slightly bigger. Expand effects, optical flares, and this is our position XY. I'll click on the stopwatch and connect it to the position of the driver. And right now you can already see it's following the yellow null. I'm also going to change the mode of this layer. I hid it away. Into screen and select a different preset. Now, while this flare is quite pretty, I do not want to have those aperture streaks because the movement is pretty quick and the whole thing becomes a bit too chaotic. Keep in mind we're going to have all the particles and stuff like that inside here. So let's go to options. Select maybe a different presets. In my test video, I believe I used this one. Nope. Let me find this one. This is the one I used. Real Sun. Go to options and get rid of all the extra elements. So we don't want the sparkle. We don't want the multi-iris. Go away, go away. We pretty much want to be left alone with just the glow. Okay, so right now we have the glow that follows our reveal. Now if we preview this video, it looks a little bit boring. I mean, this flare is constantly the same size, it doesn't really have any life to it. So we can use the optical flares built in flickering mode. Let's expand the flicker, set the speed to 50 and the amount to 50 as well. And also, while we're at it, we can animate some properties. So it's a little bit too big. Now we're going to have the particles underneath it, and we don't want everything to turn into total shine extravaganza. So scale down to 50, and let's animate the brightness. So when it starts drawing the final line of the Q, from somewhere around here, it will disappear. So let's just animate it down to 0, maybe ease the keyframe, and we can truncate that layer. So let's preview it right now. Yes, there's definitely more life to it right now. It looks like it's actually working away at this process, not simply moving around. Alright, so the flare is done. Before we do particles, maybe we could change the look of the composition a little bit. I mean, that black background, it's quite depressive and doesn't look all that great. So let's create one more solid and call it vignettes. Move it just above the background and apply effect, generate ramp. Where is ramp? Right here. And I have a little preset that I created in here, which automatically positions the start of ramp in the center of the composition and the end in the top left corner, creating a pretty nice arrangement. So for the center color, we can go with a kind of golden brownish. And for the end of it, we can actually leave it black. And maybe we could apply a second ramp. Let's just duplicate this vignette, remove the expression I have in here. I mean, now of course you don't have that preset right now. What you need to do is put the start of ramp in the center and end of ramp in one of the corners. for the previous layer. For this layer, we're going to switch it to linear ramp, move the start of ramp to the top, end of ramp to the bottom, and quickly switch the colors. So the end color will become the brown and the start color will be black. Now if we switch the mode of this layer, a bit more space, okay. If we switch the mode of this layer into screen and maybe lower its opacity, that's going to look just slightly better than just a single oval. Let me just check something. Yes, I'm working in the 8-bit space in here, and I'm not sure if it's going to show on the video, but I'm getting a little bit of banding on those gradients, and that's simply because 8-bit color resolution is not high enough to allow smooth gradients. So with the Alt button pressed, I'm gonna click on the 8bpc, 8 bits per channel text in here, and switch it to 16. Now you could go all the way up to 32, but I don't think it's really necessary for this project. This should do just fine. Okay, now we're ready for the particles. Let's just tidy up a little bit, and we don't have too much space in this limited screen estate. So we can shy away the vignettes, we can shy away the background, we can even hide our reveal animation and the flare. We're not gonna be doing anything with that, leaving us with just the driver in the timeline. Okay, new solid, and that's going to be called particles. And for particles, I'm going to use another plugin by Trapcode called Particular. And if you've been using After Effects for a while, you're probably familiar with it. If you're not, it's pretty much a must-have. So let's apply it to the particles and set it up. So the first thing we will want to do will be attaching the particles emitter into our driver. Now we're going to be expanding a lot of properties in here, and I have a feeling we're going to run out of our little single screen real estate, so let's rearrange the interface of After Effects a little bit. Do something a little bit more unconventional, having the timeline on the left, preview, sorry, the timeline on the right, preview on the left, and this should be enough to work with. Alright, driver, hit P for position, particles, yeah, now we can expand it nicely and see everything we need. We go to emitter, emitter position, XY, and link this one to our driver position. Now, particular works in a 3D space, but as long as you keep the position Z at 0, you shouldn't have any problems. It should follow our null properly. Once you get into animating cameras and changing the depth, it may become a little bit more involved, but for now we're good. Okay, now let's modify the look of the particles themselves. So I'm going to hide away the emitter and go unroll the particle properties. Now, it took a little bit of experimentation when I did it originally, so I'm just going to start typing in the values that I memorized, and let's hope I remember them correctly. We're going to set the life of the particle at 1.5 seconds with the randomness set to the maximum, which is 100. Switch the particle type into glow sphere without depth of field, and lower the sphere feather into, let's say, 10 or maybe even 5. Next, the size. I think 2 worked for me. Yep, pretty small, with the size random at 90%. So that creates some nice variety in here. And actually, we can go back to emitter right now and increase the amount of particles into, let's say, 3000. We're going to be having quite a few of them. Now, this looks really bad right now, but that's going to change very, very soon. Let's change the color from white into an orange so that it fits with our overall color scheme. Some sort of bright orange. And set the color random to perhaps 20. And that's going to give us just a little bit of variation on those colors. Also, we can change the transfer mode from normal into add, so the overlapping particles will create some extra shine, and you can see already this is starting to look much better than it did a moment ago. Now let's change the opacity into 50 So they are not quite as strong, but still shine a lot when overlapping, and opacity random to maybe 30 or so. The more variation, the better. Particular comes with a really nice preset for opacity over life. Let's just change it in here. And it's the last one on the rollout. And what it does, if you look at this curve, it starts the particles full opacity and then slowly and smoothly lowers it to 0. But while it does so, it spikes several times, creating a very nice flicker effect, and it's going to end up looking like a pixie dust or something really shiny falling down. We can also now change the layers transfer mode into add, and that's gonna make it look a little better. I mean, as you can see, when it was on normal, the particles in front of the text made it look kind of dirty. With add, they simply disappear and everything looks proper. Next, let's adjust the velocities. Right now the direction is uniform. I'm going to switch it to outwards, switch the spread to the maximum, decrease the velocity to, let's say, 50. Increase the randomness all the way to 100 and distribution to 1. And this is starting to look much more organic right now. We no longer have that well-defined shape, and this is what we're going for. Additionally, let's go to physics properties. We're working with the air physics model, and the first thing we want to do is give the air some resistance, so the particles don't just fly away as in vacuum, but slow down as they move. Now once we've done that, we can also increase the gravity to make sure that they fall down, and if I recall correctly, 200 was a good value for that. Finally, we can add a little bit of turbulence field so that the whole motion looks slightly bit more organic. We would affect the position by 75, and I think that's the only value that we need to change. Now, let's see. I'm not sure, but I think we may be done with it. I'm going to quickly pre-render it, and let's have a look at the results. And yes, it looks pretty good. There are still a couple of things I would like to tweak. First of all, I don't like that the particles are in quite thin stream. Second, right in here we're getting some weird jump from the turbulence field. So let's fix those two and we should be done with the project. I think right now we can get our timeline back at the bottom so that we can see what we're animating. And of course, the emitter doesn't stop. Just like we did with the flare, we want it to fade away towards the end. So at around the time when the Q stroke starts, we can set the particle amount to, hell, 10,000. Why not? Keyframe it and then go to the 4 seconds mark, bring it to 0 and ease it. And let's see, when do the particles go off the screen. Are still here. 6 seconds looks like a good spot to finish the animation. And now that we increase the amount of particles, you can see thin stroke that I was talking about. It looks more like a trail of a rocket rather than pixie dust. So I think this can be fixed by increasing the original velocity of the particles to 100. Yep, they are flying away nicely right now. Let's preview this. And this is looking much better. And it seems that even that turbulence field is no longer an issue right now, because we have just enough of randomness happening on the screen to make it look fine. Let's just wait a few more seconds until it finishes rendering. You may also observe the flicker I mentioned earlier, resulting from the opacity over life ramp that we used. And it's done. Well, it looks pretty close to our original assumption. The only thing that could be modified is, I think the background is way too strong right now. Let's also see if we could do something with the flare. Let's unshy it and see how would the flare look in the add mode. Absolutely dreadful. It's blowing up. the colors. Let's keep it at screen. Check the transparency for vignettes. Maybe lower the round vignette. Yes, this is much better. And possibly for the particles, we can lower their individual opacity further, so it just doesn't get quite so strong here in the middle. Let's switch it to 35. This does look better. Okay, so all you need to do at this point is enable motion blur on all the layers, enable the global motion blur, and hit render. So this is how it looks once it's finished and rendered with motion blur. I think it became a pretty nice animation. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and if you want to see more of my works or other tutorials by me, make sure to visit kubahq.com, my personal website. In there you can find lots of interesting stuff, from my visual experiments to the portfolio of my motion graphics company, a webcomic, and of course the tutorials and presets section, slowly filling up with goodies, tutorials and other items of interest. For Kuba HQ, I'm Kuba Michalski, signing out. See you next time.